See all of you.
Good to see you too. You look good.
Look, I don't get a chance to dress up very often, so it is what it is. See all of you.
Good to see
But
you.
thank you.
I know nobody can tell, but I'm wearing really great shoes tonight.
I did see the shoes. Here's the live link to YouTube if you want to share with your friends. Share this online too. Hi, Deborah.
Oh, hi, Deborah.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah. Hi, Rafa. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you. And you?
Good. Your mural has received a lot of attention.
Well deserved.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's something you can't miss when you go down to that part of campus.
That is for sure. Yes, it is visually very bold.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Hopefully, it's getting the right attention, you know? So,
Yes.
we'll see.
Hi, Danielle. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. It's good to
I see we're still in the sunshine on campus.
Yes. Yeah, I should try to change my background here. See if I can find one that reflects the evening.
Yeah, we need some night pictures of campus. It looks like we're on campus in the evening.
Oh, I actually do have one that I took myself. This is it.
Oh, that's nice. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, this is great. Look at this. I took that once when I exited our recreational center one evening, and I just thought the moon was gorgeous and I wanted to capture it.
And Tamara, you look like you haven't moved all day. Your hair's a little different from this morning, but
I took my hair down. Yeah, I have not moved all day. I know this is your day in and day out, but it has been one of those days where it has been a nonstop Zoom.
Yep.
I'm happy that my stool bounces.
I just walked my dog to the mailbox, and that was the only time I've gotten up today. So.
All right, I think we can start. Sarah, do you want to take the reins?
Sure. Just before we get started, and in light of the fact that some of us are currently present on university property, we acknowledge that the University of Nevada, Reno is situated on the traditional homelands of the Numa, Northern Paiute, Wasu, Washoe, and Nuwa, Western Shoshone, and Nuwa, Southern Paiute peoples. These lands continue to be a gathering place for Indigenous peoples, and we recognize their deep connection to these places. We extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live and learn on their territory. And with that, I would like to welcome everybody who's here this evening, including those whose faces I cannot see on Zoom. Hello, and welcome to what we hope will be a really interesting and thought-provoking evening. My name is Sarah Ferguson. I am the founding member of the Reno Contemporaries, a group here in town that is dedicated to promoting and supporting the arts and building community around the arts in Reno. And the Reno Contemporaries are thrilled to be collaborating with the Lilly Museum For those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you do, the Lilly Museum is a phenomenal resource and beautiful facility that is full of dynamic and interesting art, and their dynamic and interesting and fabulous executive director, Vivian Zavaroto. They are just tremendous and doing really wonderful things here on campus and in town. And this collaboration was really brought about by the creation of the tremendous mural created by Rafael Blanco, who is actually joining us this evening. Hello, Rafael. And it's on South Virginia Street on Sierra Hall. And when you drive by, you just can't help. I mean, the first time I saw it, I almost crashed into the sidewalk because it is just so bold and colorful and evocative. And when I saw it, it almost brought me to tears. And I thought, we have got to have a conversation about this, because this is just going to spark people's interest and excitement and passions. And so I reached out to Vivian, and that's how this idea was born, was using this mural and this concept of public art as a way to launch a further dialogue about a lot of the issues that we have been facing as a society for hundreds of years, but especially they feel especially relevant right now, issues around race and inclusion and diversity. And that's what this mural at least was all about for me. And so, we wanted to bring in some additional voices to talk about it further and to bring some additional perspective to what it means for our community, for our country, for this university. And so we're really excited to have everybody here to participate in that dialogue this evening. And so with that, I will introduce the aforementioned fabulous, wonderful executive director of the Lilly Museum, Vivian Zavaroto.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure to collaborate with you and the Reno Contemporaries. I'd like to start this event by introducing some of the people involved in the Sierra Hall Mural Project. Kevin Sivakumar, third-year biology and nutrition student here at the university. He is right now inside the Lilly Museum on the bottom floor here with us. Rafael Blanco, UNR alumnus and incredibly talented artist that painted this mural. Tamara Schranz, director of the School of the Arts. Toby Toland, assistant director of residential life. And Deborah Madomog, that is here as well, the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts. So going back in time, when Toby reached out to me about this project, I was incredibly excited with the prospect of having a public art piece here on campus of this scale. But to me, the most important aspect of this project was the involvement of the students and what they expected from this project. I remember one of their first requests. They said, "We don't want this to be only an art piece. We want it to be more than that. We want change." And that really stuck with me. Last week, the university held a dedication event for this mural in which President Sandoval, Provost Carmen, and Vice President for Student Services, Shannon Ellis they were present. I'll be sharing the link for those of you who'd like to watch it. As Dr. Ellis said during this event, we know that art can transform more than, in this particular case, a residential hall. We hope it also transforms minds, values, thoughts, and actions. With that in mind, we wanted to use this incredible piece of art to start a conversation about what it represents. We have two amazing speakers here with us this evening who will share some of their thoughts with all of us. I'd like to introduce Zileila Mbogali and Daniel Enrique Perez. Zileila Mbogali is the Deputy General Counsel for System Administration at the Nevada System of Higher Education. Prior to joining NSHE, he was a Deputy District Attorney in Washoe County for over 5 years, where he prosecuted criminal cases ranging from low-level drug possession to murder. Mbogali earned his undergraduate degree in philosophy here at UNR. He earned his law degree from California Western School of Law, where he served as president of the Black Law Student Association and published an article on international environmental law in the UC Davis Journal of International Law and Policy. He has served as judicial law clerk at the Nevada Supreme Court, in the U.S. District Court for the District of Nevada, and the Second Judicial District Court in Reno. In addition, he has worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of California and in the U.S. District Court of the Southern District of California. He was appointed by U.S. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto and U.S. Senator Jackie Rosen to the Northern Nevada District Court Review Commission, which evaluates and recommends candidates for the federal bench. He was also appointed by the Nevada Supreme Court to the court's bench bar committee, a statewide group of lawyers who work with the justice to study court rules and internal operating procedures. He is licensed to practice law in Nevada and in California. He teaches courts in the Criminal Justice Department. He also teaches race and law in the Gender, Race, and Identity program here at the university. Daniel Enrique Perez was appointed Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the College of Liberal Arts at the University of Nevada, Reno in 2019. He's also an Associate Professor of Chicanx and Latinx Studies in the Department of World Languages and Literature and a Faculty Associate of the Core Humanities Programs and the Department of Gender, Race, and Identity. He holds a bachelor's degree in mathematics, a master's degree in comparative literature, and a PhD in Spanish with specialization in Chicanx and Latinx studies. His research focuses on the intersections of gender, ethnicity, and sexuality, especially concerning queer, Chicanx, and Latinx identities. His books include Rethinking Chicana, Chicano, and Latina Popular Culture, an edited anthology of play titled Latino Heritage on Stage, Dramatizing Heroes and Legends, and a collection of poems titled Things You See in the Dark. We're going to start with remarks by Zelalem. So please help me welcome him here with us tonight.
Thank you, Vivian, very much. Thank you. Thank you. What a great event. I'm so honored to be here. Sometimes I feel out of place with all of these amazing artists and people in the art community, but maybe I can add a little bit of my perspective here. So I want to start just by pointing out that I think Raphael's piece is more than art, right? And I think he believes this too, as far as I know. Because art is never just art to me, right? Art is communication. And oftentimes it provides a voice for the voiceless. You know, public art to me is really a metaphor for the intractable issue of race, because public art is unavoidable. And I also believe that discussions on race are unavoidable for so many reasons, which I think we're going to talk about some of those tonight. You know, we're on the heels or in the middle of a presidential election right now. And for me, for my entire life, I've always felt that politics is a deeply public activity. You know, I know a lot of people consider it private. They don't share who they vote for, and that's their right. But I've always believed that the organization of political movements and political objectives are deeply public activities, right? Because we're talking about how we are going to govern ourselves. I also believe that art is inherently political, right? And so the two intersect. And I think they've intersected here with Raphael's piece in a major, major way. So for me, I'm not an artist. I mean, I'm not a painter, but I do have some artistic sensibilities. I play music and had a musical group with my brother after college, and write a little bit of music now and then. But I was really raised, I believe, in the golden era of hip hop music. And I love hip hop music. That's my music, right? Well, and I love all forms of music, but hip hop really has a special place in my heart. And one of my favorite groups of all time in the hip hop industry is A Tribe Called Quest. And A Tribe Called Quest is a hip hop group, for those of you that don't know, from Queens, New York City, and really birthed a sort of conscious version of hip hop music where the lyrics, the sort of complexion of the music was political and was trying to make a difference in the communities that they came from. And so from the earliest of ages, when I first listened to hip hop music, I always associated music with politics. And I remember growing up with friends and talking about new hip hop albums coming out, and they would tell me, I don't like when hip hop gets political or when they make political statements through their music. And it just couldn't compute with me. I mean, because that was the point of music. That was the point of art, was to make a statement, right? To try to show where people come from, right? Try to show how we're all, how we share many similarities, even though we come from different places, right? And that was just, that was hard for me to compute. So that's my perspective on art. That's my perspective on politics. And, in terms of race, as Vivian had to read in my long introduction, I'm sorry about that. As you had to hear, I teach in the race and law program, and I've had a professional history in criminal justice. And the criminal justice system is one distinct area of society where you see race explaining a lot of things, right? Particularly with respect to African Americans. Just very quickly, I'm sure you've all heard this before, but back in the 1970s, there were less than 200,000 people in jail and prison. And today, 2020, we have over 2.3 million people in jail and prison. And a majority of them are Black and brown men, right? We have nearly 7 million people on probation or parole and or jail and prison. Just African Americans make up 13% of the population, about 13.1%, but constitute 28% of all arrests, 40% of those incarcerated in jail or prison, and 42% of the population on death row. Those are just skewed statistics that are explainable by race. And you wonder how we got here. It's a long history. We'll get into some of this, but stereotyping, how the African American man in popular culture has been depicted as dangerous and criminal, presumed guilty, not presumed innocent, right? And how the images through popular culture of African Americans in particular have evolved to fit a narrative of keeping African Americans in a second-class social status, right? Previously, during slavery, a lot of popular imagery through pamphlets and newspapers, magazines, etc., depicted African Americans as happy slaves, right? The happy Sambo, enjoying their lot in life, right? To help justify the institution of slavery. And then after the Civil War and the Reconstruction Amendments were passed, now we had free Black Americans in society. Society wasn't used to that. And so the imagery changed. And all of a sudden, African Americans were being depicted as dangerous, chasing after white women in The Birth of a Nation, right? That shift helped justify the same objective, right, which is to keep African Americans in the social place that they were, but it wasn't consistent at all, right? It was totally backwards. And so that just shows how, and that stereotype has stuck with African Americans to this day, right? And I think that helps explain some of the racial profiling that we see, some of the skewed statistics in criminal justice. So that's just one way of kind of exploring the idea of how important visual representation is and how important Raphael's piece is to help reverse some of that and to show everybody, you know, that we are all human beings, no matter what color we are, and that we're all in this together. So if that was a little long, I'm sorry, but those are my opening thoughts.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that it's, you know. Danielle, would you like to share some of your thoughts as well?
Yeah, certainly. And thank you very much, Z. It's really an honor to be here with you this evening. And your comments just remind me of the important conversations that this piece is eliciting and the reason why it's on our campus, right? So thank you for those remarks. And of course, I also want to thank everyone who helped to make this mural an outstanding addition to our community and who made it possible. And of course, these murals and this particular project cannot happen without the support of many, many people. And I know there are people who do not like to be in the limelight, but of course I want to recognize them, including people like Vivian Zavataro, who we've met, but Tamara Scrons, the director of the School of the Arts, Toby Tolan, Sarah Ferguson, various students, some who are here, like Kaveen and other student organizations, Toby Tolan I mentioned, and of course our esteemed and talented artist, Rafael Blanco. But I think this mural really demonstrates what is possible through the collective efforts of all these people and many more. So thank you all. And I think we should recognize them. I want to give you a hand and just praise you for all the fine work. Please, thank you very much. There are many compelling things about this mural, and I just want to raise a couple of them in the few minutes that I have, and then we can talk about some of these maybe later. But the things that most interest me, and these themes are also, I think, very much interlaced, are number one, the role of public art and the conversations that a mural like this can facilitate and has already facilitated. Also, the fact that the artist is an alum of UNR and always will be a member of the Wolfpack. And then, and also the communal and collective nature of the art project and the tremendous gift and everlasting gift that is the result of this unique collaboration. So I'd like to first recognize that this project is an artivist project, and it allows for the intersections of various forms of identity like race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, religion, and immigration to become a really important site of conversation, but also of celebration and strength, right? It's a form of public artivism. Of course, the combination of public art and activism that can elicit conversations where we can examine some of these things like identity politics, structural racism in the way that Z was discussing earlier, inequities in society, and other social issues. Clearly, this piece is not confined to a museum or a personal collection, but it's a public artivist piece that is intended to be widely visible and accessible, and facilitate many forms of interaction that might not happen otherwise as well, right? So I think it serves to advance a cause, become part of a collective movement, but doing that while also celebrating diversity and an array of identities that are not just present in the piece, but that move well beyond this very important piece. As Z mentioned, also at a time like this, the one we are currently witnessing in the US, right, where divisiveness, white supremacy, and violence have all become more visible, we need displays of activism that present counter narratives. And I think this is precisely what this piece does, right? It calls for unity in a time like this. It calls for a respect for diversity. and also for action, but action to facilitate those things, right? Action to help unite, to also celebrate, to empower others, to lift others up, or as like we like to say in the College of Arts, to help elevate others. And especially our diverse communities, right? Public art is and can be this powerful, right? It invites us to reflect, to ask questions, to have important conversations, but also, as the title of this forum suggests, right, to ignite us, to incite us, to inspire us in ways that hopefully get us to act and actually to do things that will help advance some of the work that this piece might elicit, right, collectively. So as the Audre Lorde quote on the mural should remind us that our differences don't divide us or immobilize us, but silences can and often do. So the call, I think, is for people to tell their stories, for people to speak their truth, right? And also to speak up, of course, when witnessing injustices. And I'd also would argue that it's a collective voice. And this is how, like, Rafa brings them all together, right, in this unique way to show that sort of unity and collectivity that becomes also a call to action, movement building, and also aligning with a very important movement that has developed in the US that some of us might refer to as a new form of civil rights movement, right? The other part of this, a piece that I find very compelling as well, I mentioned, is the artist himself, and Rafa, you know, being an alum of the university. I am enthralled by something that Rafael said in an interview regarding this project. And it is, Rafa, when you say, quote, "I came to the university as a painter and left as an artist." And to me, that just speaks wonders, not just of course, Rafa and his talent and his ability and what his work at UNR was, but of course, it speaks wonders about the university and our faculty and staff and our community that was able to nurture and also help create an environment where a person like Rafa can come in and leave a world-class artist, and who could continue to do this work on such a large scale, and not just in UNR. Of course, he's doing this all over the place, and the work is profound, and it has a lasting impact. And I'm really looking forward to the ways in which not just this piece, but other pieces that Rafael creates will come into conversation with one another. And I know he's an artist that's going to be studied widely and will continue to have lots of success. But so I want to recognize not just Rafa, but of course, our university and everyone who has made it possible to produce such a talented and skilled artist, world-class artists like Rafa. I think Rafa also, what was clear to me is that Rafa was invested in our community, and his commitment was to giving back to our community. And not only has he given us this world-class, one-of-a-kind mural, but I don't think many people recognize that he's given so much of himself, his time, his energy, and I would argue even money, because one thing that many people don't know about this project is that it was not as expensive as it looks. When I found out what the budget was for this, I was shocked. But most people don't know that this would not have been possible without a tremendous discount that Rafa gave us. And there's no way we could have paid to have another artist who would not have provided the same sort of I don't know, deal that Rafa gave us to do this. So he was clearly more interested in giving back than to taking from our community. And Rafa, for that, we are just tremendously grateful. So this story, the artist story, is one of my favorite, right? I hope it inspires all of us to think about the various ways we can give back to our communities, even when they may seem unconventional, like giving back, gifting the community a mural, right? I mean, dollars are nice, but some gifts are priceless and everlasting. And I'd have to say that this is one of the first examples of something like that that I see at UNR. And so this is the invaluable gift that this amazing team of administrators, students, practitioners, and others have given to this university and this community. And I think it opens the door for infinite possibilities in the future. And for that, I think we should all be grateful, not just to the artists, but of course to everyone who made this possible. And I think it's a priceless gift that came out of a unique collaboration. And I have no doubt that the mural will continue to do what it is intended to do. Of course, spark meaningful conversations on several important topics like diversity, equity, inclusion, immigration, anti-racist activism, and social justice. But more importantly, to help unite and empower our diverse communities so that we can continue to create more inclusive spaces where hopefully everyone feels welcomed and valued. And thank you all. And those are my opening comments.
Thank you, Danielle. Sarah has some questions, and while she gathers those, I do want to share a couple pictures of the mural for those of you who haven't seen it yet in person.
Oh yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that you did that. Thanks, Vivian. I think that visualization is really important. I guess to kick off this conversation, this dialogue, and I certainly hope that's what it is, by the way, for anyone who's watching who has thoughts that they want to contribute, either in answer to any of my questions or ask of Zelalem or Danielle or any of the other participants of tonight, I certainly invite you all to make this the dialogue that, we're hoping that it will be. This is not super formal, so please participate as you feel comfortable and inclined. Just starting things off and to sort of take this immediately to a more personal level. One of the things that you mentioned in your comments was that, and I think you were saying this sort of in a humbling way, but it still struck me. You said, I sometimes feel out of place among all these artists and in these art spaces. And Danielle, in your comments, you said that it's a way, art can be a way for people to tell their stories. And so I would invite the two of you, to the extent that you feel comfortable, to talk about the way that you became conscious of the representation of folks like yourselves, people of color in art and art spaces, and the ways that you either feel welcomed or excluded in those spaces and in those pieces. So maybe Z, if you want to start out.
Sure, thank you. That's a very good question, a personal question. And like I was saying earlier, the art form that touches me the most is music. And, when I was growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, that's when hip hop started coming coming to the fore and becoming a mainstream part of popular music. And, you know, before that, you know, there was the hair metal of the 80s and the guitar, and, you know, you're coming out of the funk era of the 70s and stuff. And this new version of hip hop was such a eye-opening experience for me, just because I saw myself represented in the art. There was a music video from A Tribe Called Quest, as I mentioned earlier, from a song called Check the Rhyme, right? And it's this video of A Tribe Called Quest doing the song, and they're on top of this like building, and it's basically a block party. They're basically having a block party, and they're doing the music on the top of the building. There's all the crowd down on the street, and it's pretty simple. That's basically the gist of the video. And but everybody there in that video, and I watched that hundreds of times as a kid, was happy, and they looked like me. And it was diverse too. There were Puerto Ricans, there were other kinds of Hispanics, there were some white people, there's a lot of Black people. And that to me is the image of America that I like to hold close to my heart, right? And that's the image of art that I like to hold close to my heart. And it's an indelible image in my mind now. And I really compare a lot of the art I see to that one of those first experiences that I had. And so, you know, I ended up feeling included in the art that I loved very early on. So I was very fortunate, you know, to have that. But I realized not everybody has had that experience. And I know there are different forms of art, and mural art, other kinds of painting, sculpture, etc., that have not been as inclusive as the hip hop art form. And so, I guess that's my answer, to say that I feel fortunate to have seen myself in that kind of art form. And I hope that young people coming up can use Raphael's piece to share in that experience that I had, to see themselves represented in the community, to see themselves represented in a university community that they're a part of, you know, and particularly the higher education community, because right, that's what we're doing in higher education, is preparing people to enter the world. A world that is multicultural, a world that is pluralistic, and where the pluralism and the diversity is the strength of the country, the strength of the organization, not its weakness, right? And to become familiar with that as a concept, and to promote that in their own lives. And so it's hard to overstate how important Raphael's piece can be, and probably is, to young people that drive by or walk around campus. It's just so important. So again, well done, Raphael. I hope we see more of you and more of your art in the university community to come.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Z. I would add that besides representation, I think, Z, and you alluded to this in your opening remarks, positive representation of people of color is what is even more important. We have plenty of negative representations of us in the media, and that's something that most people like us have to contend with throughout our entire lives and have to work against. Right, as a brown man, I have spent my entire life trying to prove to people or demonstrate to people that I'm not a criminal. And it doesn't matter if I follow all the rules in society. It doesn't matter that how old I am either. Even as a faculty member, as an administrator, I have been observed by cashiers who think I'm in the store to steal. When I graduated from college, I was pulled over by cops and subjected to search. Cops who could not believe that there was nothing, that I was not doing anything wrong. And so these are realities for many of us. And so when it comes to art, though, and I think, Z, you talked about culture and heritage and all that. And I grew up, of course, with some forms of that I think helped for me in terms of identity formation. However, in art, I was not really introduced to it until I got to the university level. And that's when I discovered Chicano cultural production and Chicano art, and of course, learned about an entire tradition that I had never known about before. And so when I think about a mural like this one, I think about the important role, for example, that Chicano art played during the 1960s during the Chicano movement, right? And how people used it to help advance a very important social movement in the US during that period. And that's why I think one cannot overemphasize the importance of visibility, representation, and positive representations of people of color in art, right? Because it can be used that way.
Absolutely, and makes me think, you know, touching on what both of you said is this idea of representation in higher education and the possibility that especially students of color who are arriving on campus and possibly encountering art in a real way for the first time, that's one of the first things that they see. I mean, that has the power to be, you know, an incredible symbol of the inclusivity of this campus, right? And this community, hopefully. So along these lines, I mean, Danielle and Zelalem, we both talked about sort of some of your experiences and the conversation that we're having. And this mural is an incredibly positive part of the conversation that we've been having over the last 6 to 9 months. And not to dive too deep into the weeds on, you know, everything that's been going on. I know this is kind of a big question that I'm about to ask you, but sort of broadly speaking, fitting this mural into the conversation that we've been having as a country and a community in the last 6 to 9 months. How do you see the conversation as changing the way that we talk about things? And this mural is fitting into that conversation. And if it indeed has changed anything about the way that we talk about race and inclusivity in our community. Danielle, since Zelalem went first, you can go first.
Okay, yeah, we have already had conversations on this, and I think it's an important conversation to have. That is that this piece, even though it was in the works for 2 years, I think it's important to recognize that it very much is a reflection of our current times, right? And that's because Rafa was so willing to incorporate feedback throughout the entire process. Even while he was painting, he was getting feedback from so many people from our communities, so many important voices from our students. And to give you an example, and this is why I think one of the most compelling things about this art piece is that it is a result of a collection of people, right, who were very invested in seeing it completed, and on such an enormous scale as well. And so, for example, I remember some of the conversations that we had while Rafa, even maybe before Rafa came to do the work, but while he was doing the work, we were generating ideas about, you know, what should the text on the piece actually be, and I remember giving a suggestion that there might be a resist FIS on it, but you know, just giving the suggestions, but not saying how it should look or any much more about it, but just kind of him taking all of that into account and then interpreting it and giving us a visual representation of it in such a unique way, I think speaks to how important the piece is as a reflection of that collectivity and also our current time. And so all of that energy, I think, that we help to provide during those critical stages actually came from what we knew was going on around us, right? And that is, of course, the protest, the Black Lives Matter movement. And it was just clear that we all had that somewhere in the back of our mind, in the front of our mind, all around us. And so So I think when we put this into context, I think we have to speak about what we're all currently experiencing in this country and how important it is in contributing something important to that conversation.
I want to add something to that. Just thinking about those days, everything happened so fast all of a sudden, and Rafa was here and we were talking to the students and all that. So I wanted, and the students were really adamant that we were paying attention to what was happening at the time, because it all started, oh, let's have a mural about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then when Rafael landed here, all those protests started happening, Black Lives Matter and all that. And the students were really adamant about us highlighting that and what this mural represented. So maybe Kaveen, do you want to share some of your experience during that time?
Yes, of course. And first, I'd just like to thank you all for the opportunity to be here. I think I have a lot of gratitude towards this university for all the leadership opportunities that I've been able to pursue while here, and working along with this mural and this project and seeing it to its completion has been really rewarding. So I'd just like to say that first. But I think in regards to the process, I'm a resident assistant on campus in Great Basin Hall, and that's how I was able to be linked to this project with working alongside Toby specifically on a Res Life level. And I know that this was in the works for years, and actually it was 2 years ago I was one of the students that first heard the first budget proposal to create a mural in Sierra Hall, which was actually just supposed to be the white wall in front of it. And we never expected it at that time to be something this grand and marvelous. So it's really amazing to see it in the way that it's been represented so far. But I know that as a student, during the discussions that we were having over the summer, something that a lot of the students wanted to see was something that was reflective of the times that we live in right now. And I think especially this summer was a lot of reflection for a lot of people about the issues that this country faces in regards to race, and something that the students really advocated for, and something that myself and a lot of other of my fellow students advocated for in those meetings and those email chains was something to represent the now. And I think that is represented both in the quote and in the fist that's depicted at the very top of the mural. I think it was important for us to see the first large public art project on campus to be representative of almost like a snapshot of the time that it was created in. And I think that was, especially the quote and the fist at the very top, I think represent that really well.
I did get, I want Rafa to also share his experience at the time, because he was getting bombarded with requests and whatnot, and change his whole design to really make an art piece that it was current to the times, and also taking in consideration what the students wanted from it. Rafa, do you want to speak to it?
Sure, thank you. I have so many things to say that I was just like writing notes, and so it's kind of difficult to narrow it down, but I'll do my best. I think when I landed in Reno, I definitely had an idea of what I was going to do. But as an artist, as a public artist, I have experienced that adaptation is key. Meaning you come with an idea to the city, you come like with an idea like to campus, you know what you're supposed to be doing, and yet you have to adapt to the times, and you have to adapt to what's going on, and also to what people want. I think Danielle was mentioning this like really well. This is a group collaboration. I have the luck to be the artist behind the brush, but I really feel that this was not just my piece. This is something that I was able to have that voice that Zelalem was talking about. I love to paint, and I was very grateful that I was chosen to speak that voice. But what I'm trying to say is that I was trying to speak a voice of many voices behind me. So that's why that adaptation, listening to the students, listening to all the feedback from the students, from administration. I think that is key to success and key to make an artwork that is going to be timeless. Or timelessness, yeah. So it is important that as an artist, it is not just my piece, it is not just my work. It is something that it has been in the works for 2 years by the students. So that is something that is important to have in mind while I was working.
We got a question on YouTube for you, Rafa. The guest said, "What is the difference between a painter and an artist, Rafa?" And I did the Brazilian thing again. Sorry. Rafa, what did you learn at the university that helped that transition for you?
What a great question. I think the main reason, because I have always said that, and I think Tamara can speak to this. I have been saying this since I graduated. I already came with the skills of painting. When I came to the MFA program, I already knew how to paint. I already knew how to express myself. I already knew how to make that illusion of reality on a flat canvas. But I was really clueless about the rest. I was really clueless not only about many other art forms, but about the conceptual, the idea, the purpose, how to become an artist, and how to make art your lifelong experience. I took classes that they were kind of like seminars. I took classes that they were just teaching us on how to improve your resume, how to make an interview. I took classes that they were about conceptual art, and I did many paintings, but I also did sculptures. I did photography. I also work with audio. I did things. I was pushed in many different ways that it was out of my comfort zone, and that made me have this broader view, much farther from painting. I came with my own beliefs, and I left after 3 years after 3 years and a half of my MFA program. I felt that I left with a full bag, just like full of tools, and it doesn't mean that I knew that I was going to be successful. I just felt inside that I did the right choice of coming to UNR. And just a quick remark. It actually took me 7 years to enter into an MFA program. So I was denied during like 7 years to enter around the country. Like I applied to many different universities. And that was really difficult. I think my year number 3 and 4, I actually quit painting for a couple of weeks, for a month. I was really discouraged, but that was like super important because I realized that I couldn't survive on what others thought of me. I was painting for others and not for my own. So what I'm trying to say is, finally, on that 7th year of just trying getting accepted, and that I was accepted at UNR, I was so hungry. I was so ready. I was so excited that I took it all in, and I think the faculty played an amazing role, and I'm like so happy that Tamara is here today, because she was the main reason, because I had like such a positive experience. So for those of you that don't know, Tamara before was the MFA program director, and I think I can speak for my classmates. We all knew that Tamara was kind of just the column of the program. She has always worked really hard for all of us. So she was a mentor to me. She was the person to go to for anything that I felt. And so what I'm trying to say is that UNR was very successful in my experience, and Tamara and all the faculty had a really great impact.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rafa, for sharing all that. Sarah, do you have more questions?
Well, one thing I was just really struck by listening to both Kavin and Rafa, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to formulate this into a question, but one of the things that Kavin was talking about was that it was really important for the students for this piece to be a snapshot in time, to be representative of the moment that was happening when it was created. And then Rafa, you were saying how important it is for you to take into account all of the voices that came behind you, is how you phrased it, which I thought was just such a beautiful image. And so this concept of this piece in particular, but also generally art that is often advocacy, as being both contemporary and historic, and how important that is as we move forward with conversations around these issues, that we take into account what is happening both now and historically, which is something that both Z and Zelalem and Danielle, you touched on in your briefly in your opening comments. And I was wondering, I guess, if you have any more to sort of say about that concept of the duality of contemporary and historic components of art as they relate to, discussions about race and diversity.
Sure, I'll start. I mean, I'm sure everyone has a lot to say on that. That's a very good question. I think this piece, like Kavin said, represents a moment in time for sure. But it also is just a symbol of America, historically and futuristically, right? This country has always been multicultural. It has always been pluralistic. In the previous 100 or 150 years before the Constitution was ratified, it was pluralistic and multicultural. We just happened to enshrine that reality into two documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution itself, and now we have them forever. But before that, there were Black and white bondsmen, indentured servants living together in the Virginia colonies, getting along, relaxing together, working together. That's the history of this country. And if you look forward, right, there have been projections on demographics that, right, we will become a, quote, majority minority country sometime in the 2040s. And so it's the past, it's the present, and it's the future. Mm-hmm. And just a quick note on the present, I think what happened over the summer and what's been happening over the last several years in terms of the visual depictions of African Americans being shot or brutalized by the police has really opened the door for a conversation about it, because I don't know who it was. I think Will Smith got credit for it, but people have been saying it's not that racism just started happening, it's that we're filming it now, right? and so I think the filming of it and the spreading of that and showing it to the world and showing it to Americans who have never seen this or experienced it in their own lives has really helped show how race explains outcomes, right? Like we see it in statistics, but I realize statistics aren't the most accessible form of communication for people, but video is. And when you see it in front of you day after day, month after month, year after year, you start to be more open to the possibility that race can explain disproportionate outcomes in various sectors of the economy, from healthcare to criminal justice to real estate, et cetera. And so that window of opportunity that we have right now, I think not only does it help people start seeing how race functions in society, but it also shows how arbitrary it is. Like, you're looking at Walter Scott in South Carolina running away from a police officer, getting shot in the back and killed. You're seeing George Floyd handcuffed, on the ground and kneeled to death. You're seeing ordinary Americans being treated like this simply because of the color of their skin, and you realize how arbitrary that is. How skin color actually doesn't mean anything in terms of biology or in terms of inherent characteristics of human beings. And so Rafa's piece really just depicts different looking people, right? In a way, that's all it really does, right? And that is powerful because for so long we've looked at race as a way of dividing people up. Mm-hmm. And in this piece, it shows race as meaningless, really, right? That we're all human beings, and we can look differently, and we can have different skin color, but we're all connected. We're all Americans, we're all human beings, and we should all be treated equally. I mean, that's the beauty, that's the simplicity of the piece, I think, for me, and then how it relates to our current situation.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Sorry, thank you. So I think what you just mentioned, Z, is something that was, so when Rafa was mentioning there were several voices coming into the process over the summer, not all those voices were advocating for the same thing. And I think a lot of the students who were involved in this process, especially the ones that I was interacting with, didn't agree on the completion of this project. But one of the things that I was advocating for was the ambiguity that you had mentioned. Mm-hmm. I think especially when you're making public art for an entire community of 22,000+ students who attend this university, everybody deserves a chance to look up and see parts of themselves represented. And I think the ambiguity that Rafa expressed in this mural is something that's beautiful. And I think it really shows that anybody can come and look at this and see parts of themselves in there. And I know a lot of students were advocating for, I really wish that, you would depict the skin color in it. I really wish that you would show students of color in that way. And when Rafa was explaining that wasn't necessarily the style of art that he could complete on this scale, I think it was really I think we all kind of misconstrued his message in a way. His message was, I believe, that ambiguity, so that all students, all members of the Wolfpack, all members who walk past it, every single person who drives through Reno and sees this mural can see parts of themselves in it. And I think that's really important to understand exactly what you're talking about. Race is arbitrary, but the experiences aren't. But a way that we can move forward is to see depictions like this, where that ambiguity ties us all together as one.
Excellent.
Such a great point.
Yeah, I would add that, it affirms those unique identities, right? And I think that's what's also extremely important, to affirm that not just the individual and their presence in this country, but also even the locality, right? Their presence on our campus and in our community. And so that's extremely important. And I would also say, in response to Sarah's question regarding the historical contemporary duality, and I love the way that Z brought it in, expanded that to include even the future, right? And I don't think it has to be any one of those things, but I think it actually is and can be all of those things at once. And so right, it clearly incorporates historical context, not just by the Audre Lorde quote, but also thinking about the historical context that Z referenced earlier. And I like to imagine this piece, in being studied and discussed in 20 and 30 years, and the conversations that it'll continue to facilitate, right? And can you imagine what people will be experiencing in this country in 20, 30 years? Hopefully it'll be a better country, right? And I'm sure that everyone here today would like to see that happen. But what if it's not, right? What if this piece becomes very central? It already is, I think, important to the conversation, but imagine it being contextualized and also being used in whatever way it might be used to facilitate really important conversations or movements, years from now. And so that really, for me, just inspires me to just continue to facilitate these sorts of collaborations and do this type of work and just kind of put it into context and think about it in very different ways, past, present, and future.
Sarah, do you mind if I add something else? So I think it's really important to acknowledge what Kavin has said about that not everyone agreed from the beginning. There was controversy even before, which is what this is supposed to do. This is not supposed to make everyone happy, because that is not possible. That is impossible. So I think the way of getting that ambiguity that Selene, that C was talking about, and that Kavin was mentioning, and that Danielle was also talking about, is I chose the eyes. I chose to zoom in, so that way there was a sense of universality, meaning those eyes could be specific, but they could also not be specific as well. The point was, I want different people. I would like everyone to see themselves represented without specifying to the T what you are. And I think C was saying this like really well, is race doesn't matter that much, because this goes beyond that. This is about humanity. This is about all being human, and that is our commonality. We're all humans living on Earth right now, no matter the skin color, no matter our beliefs, our religion. So my idea on how to bring all this together into an image for that wall was to zoom in and make that universal statement with less is more. Meaning there are 1,000 ways that wall could be painted, but it had to be simple this way. For me, from my point of view, it had to speak directly to the viewer in a simple manner, but also in a bold way. And I also want to acknowledge how brave the university in general has been. I think it is very impressive that such a bold, bright design with such an important message has been approved. I can tell you by experience that I have been denied many times of making this type of work. So when I mentioned that this is my most important public artwork, is because I think we've been really bold at such an important time. So I just would like to thank you again for the whole university for making this happening, because it is a really bold statement.
Deborah?
Deborah, yeah.
Okay, could I just say one thing? I think this is all really wonderful and beautiful, but the connection of the historical to the specificity of the time, one of the things that it makes me think of is that the first set of eyes, as far as I understand it, belonged to Colin Kaepernick. And I think it's really important to recognize that he has been an incredible activist for the cause that was so important to the context for the times that we're talking about right now, and that he comes from UNR, and so this is honoring his legacy and his activism, and making sure that that becomes a part of the story that we tell about our current time, but also about our university.
Excellent point. Yes.
Mhm.
Having Colin there, having more than one alum from UNR is amazing.
And Deborah, yes, so thank you for mentioning that, because when I came to Reno, I didn't know that I was going to paint him. Meaning, I had many different eyes, and then just by talking to the students, they were really interested in having his eyes. And then I said, well, that's a great idea, so let's do it. And then I added also the second pair of eyes is also an alumna. Is a transsexual student, which that was also I took photos, so I had this personal connection, and then also the third set of eyes is also, it is not an alumni, but it is a Reno resident. It is a Reno resident that he actually lives, yes, like very close by, and that he is Paiute. So with that said, I think all of us behind wanted to represent these people as well as make it universal at the same time, because that is not the name of Colin Kaepernick. One may know that those are his eyes or may not know. And that ambiguity is actually something that I was looking forward to. It's a kind of that you could see his eyes, but I was trying to abstract and to simplify reality by looking at the eyes. And if you think about it, even if you zoom in into your own eyes, obviously you are going to know that those are your eyes, but not everyone is going to recognize that maybe.
I'd like to open the discussion to community members. And on that note, I'm also keeping an eye on YouTube. We are live there as well. And a question came from YouTube. So I'll ask this question, but for the audience members here on Zoom, please feel free to use the chat feature or unmute yourself or raise the Zoom hand. And I will unmute you. But so I'll share this question that came through YouTube. How important is it to have many different voices when making specifically conceptual art, and why? And they say, it seems like conceptual art made by one person may be myopic or narrow in scope. And maybe Tamara could speak to that. She's been so quiet.
You know, I actually don't think conceptual art is narrow in scope. It has a different intentionality. And thinking about where art lives, the artist's intention has a great deal to do with the way that we understand content and meaning. And I think that in the case of public art, I actually really want to acknowledge the generosity that Raphael brought to this project. And what I mean by that is generally in public art, you commission an artist and you bring them in for the work that they create. You solicit a proposal from them, you give them the guidelines of the expectations of the project, and they propose work and create it. And more times than not, are not interested in having their works designed by community or designed by committee. Rafa came to this with a very different attitude and a very rich idea of where this mural was being requested from. But he also came with openness in order to really respond to the time. I mean, when we first started talking about this, COVID was not a reality, but neither were the kinds of activisms that were happening all over the country. This was all something that occurred literally within moments of our getting this mural approved and it actually happening. And I don't know very many artists that would have actually had that openness to adapt their thinking and their concepts. I don't know that I'm answering the question fully, except to say I don't want to put all art into a single pot. I think that there are works that are more personally derived. I think there are works that are more socio-politically derived. I think there are works that are more directly and overtly politically derived, and that these things all have a place to live. And I don't see a hierarchy of these things like from a top to bottom, but I see these things existing in different ways on the plane that we exist in, right? Of place, identity, consciousness. It all comes in to bear. So I just think this was a very unique and special project. And I think the artist that we invited took a very unique and special approach to make sure that that openness was part of this.
Thank you, Tamara. Would you like to add anything, Rafa?
I cannot make it better than that. I think Tamara did great.
Sarah, do you have more questions?
Dang mute button. Gets you every time. No, I was just really, I guess, really more of a comment. I was really struck by the earlier conversation, the comments that Rafa had about the university's willingness to have such a bold statement piece of art. And sort of the subtext of that was that because it is controversial, it has been controversial, despite the fact that it is so beautiful and bold, and we all here see it as such a humanistic piece of art. It has, generated controversy and conversation, and I think that that is actually really important. I think that when people are uncomfortable, it forces them to confront, hopefully, what that discomfort is about, right? And maybe also to then have maybe this is a little bit idealistic of me, but maybe it also forces them to have a little bit of a change moment themselves. And so I think that that is, it's not a negative. I think it's a good thing that it's controversial. And I agree, Rafa, that it is incredible that the university has allowed such an incredible piece, has embraced such an amazing piece of art as this one, and had that, had the dedication. Last week was an amazing event. And so I'm just really grateful that you all could be here, and that our great speakers could, join us in this first sort of ignition, so to speak, of a conversation about these issues that are so timely and important. And, using art as the foundational piece for that is, I think, it's really an incredible gift and has been inspiring. And I would be, I hope that you all have sort of closing thoughts. I'd be certainly love to hear them.
I think Rafa has something. I have something too. So
yeah.
I was thinking that first I would like to thank the students. I think their perseverance, they were the ones starting this project. They're the reason why we have the mural today. I think if any of you are listening, obviously you are, Kavin, but if there are any more of you, this is super important. This is how important the student voice is. I think when I was a student, I realized, I didn't realize how important my voice was. Now that I'm faculty, I really see that importance. we're always trying to get the feedback from the students. We're always trying to accommodate, because we are doing this for you. We are trying to educate you, and by and and then by doing this kind of project, you are educating all of us, because your needs, it is that new generation that we need to hear. So what I'm trying to say is, keep doing this. This is the first step towards that new generation, and hopefully you can educate us better. Second, I want to thank the team, and like what I mean by the team is Vivian, Toby, and Tamara. All of you, or like many of you, just look at the mural as an art piece. For me, I take the experience of being there, painting that mural for 3 weeks, non-stop. It was really hard work, but it was an incredible experience. Not only because I was doing what I love, but also because of the team that it was behind me. Working with you three was an amazing experience, and I really mean that. I have painted in many different places, and I have many different experiences, and I can say honestly that this has been the most special for many different reasons. I knew Tamara very well, but I didn't know Vivian, and I didn't know Toby, as many other of you that I met along the way. But like what I'm trying to say is that I want to acknowledge their hard work, their effort. We were meeting so many nights on the mural side. There were so many things going on that we had to decide. Anything that I needed, they were always there. I cannot be thankful enough for the team. This was definitely a group effort.
Toby, would you like to add any remarks? We can't hear you. Maybe the microphone is not working. Take that. No. Well, Toby, I'm sure he had really nice things to say because he's wonderful.
You can add them to the chat box.
I like also to thank everybody for being here, all the participants, and for sharing your thoughts, and especially Z and Danielle for agreeing to be part of this discussion as speakers and sharing their remarks. I did want to add really quickly about controversy and art. I've been working with art for a while, and if an art piece is controversial, it's doing its job. And so I agree 100% with what Sarah was saying. And also, if you have ever taken one of my tours at the Lily, I do try to make people feel uncomfortable on purpose, just to get them to just discuss and think about issues that most people try to avoid. And I think change starts there. You gotta ignite, even if they are quiet, just make them think. And I think art has a unique way of igniting that in people, and starting these kinds of dialogues. So even some feedback that we got in the mural that might not be positive to me, just because we're creating that dialogue, even if we think it's negative, I think it's positive. It's making somebody think about these issues that otherwise wouldn't have been brought to their attention. So that's why I love art so much, and that's why I love what I do. But I wouldn't be here if there weren't artists like Rafael that could provide that for me to talk about. So thank you. And Z and Danielle, would you like to add some final remarks?
Actually, the thing that comes to mind for me is how important it is that this piece in Rafa's work, it captures the values of our institution and our college. And so UNR and the College of Liberal Arts are committed to diversity, equity, inclusion. We state this throughout, various statements that we make, our strategic plans, etc. We actively engage in anti-racist work. So it's so important for us to have something that very much complements the work we're doing. And I would say, Vivian, you mentioned about this with respect to art, but I would say that it's much more expansive, and it's with respect to education. Many of the things that we do as an institution, some of the topics that we teach are controversial, and we embrace that. And we know that by doing that is one way in which not only do we advance the work, the anti-racist work, the conversations, but do what I mentioned earlier that your work also does, and that other people have referenced in terms of like the physicality of the art piece, and that is elevate humanity, right? So there's a really great combination of tactics there that are employed. And if you can, maybe Rafa, speak briefly about, I remember we talked in another form about when you saw the canvas and the possibilities, and how it was at one point going to be much smaller, and then all of a sudden the grandiosity of it morphed it into something much, much bigger than I think many of us expected. But I would be interested in you sharing that if you can. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, sure, Danielle, thank you. So when I was approached by Vivian and by Tamara with the main idea, I went into my drawing board. I had ideas. I was thinking about for a few days how to approach this kind of work. But as you can see, the wall is intricate. It is difficult because it has many different layers, and then it has that column that is coming out. So then I was kind of confused of how they wanted me to approach, how much of the wall they were expecting me to paint. So after a couple of days, then I asked them again, I'm like, do you want me to paint just like the left side of the wall, the right side of the wall? Do you want me to paint the column? What is your interest? And as soon as they said, it is up to you. You are the artist. It is your idea what we are looking for. As soon as they say that, my world just opened up, and I said, it has to be the whole wall. No matter how difficult and how many layers, for this to work, for this to make an impact, I would like to paint everything. And I knew that it was going to be very challenging, because usually when you paint, you are doing it on a flat surface. Here, there are many different surfaces, many different materials, indents. But as soon as I sat down, it was very clear to me that those rectangles were supposed to be a zoom in of the eyes, that the column was supposed to be Nevada, like to follow with the colors. It actually was meant to be visually, it was meant to be, and as Tamara mentioned, to me, as I was painting, we talked many different times. She clearly summarized what I was trying to do, and I was responding to the architecture. I was responding to the wall, and as an artist, that was fascinating. And just the last thing that I would like to add, Danielle, is being an immigrant myself. I live diversity, like even like in my own house. I'm from Spain. My wife is from Mexico. Our kids are from here. So we have these 3 different cultures at the house. When I came to this country for the first time, I was 19. And the first thing that struck me was everyone is different. Everyone, I couldn't find 2 persons that were alike. And I was coming from the opposite. I was growing up in a country where we were and we still are very similar. We all look alike, we all dress the same way, we all have the same beliefs. So coming to this country was shocking. And I was so fascinated by that. And also that comes with many different problems as C was mentioning. And I saw the need for unity and being able to do this kind of work for the sake of unity. And in that wall was a perfect experience as an artist.
Thank you very much. And the site specificity, I think, is so important, not just the building, but also the fact that it's on Virginia Street. And so people might think that it's on UNR campus, and it technically is, but the fact that it's on a public street makes it a nexus between the university and, of course, the larger community, and served as a bridge, right, between those very important communities. So thank you very much for those comments. Z, did you?
Just making sure we weren't going to hear any more brilliance from Rafa. I mean, my God, like, so selfishly, I should say, this has been very enjoyable just to hear all of you speak, but especially what Rafa just went through, which was really explaining the creative process. Like, he just explained to us how he envisioned the wall and determined how he was going to create his art based on the architecture. I mean, that's fascinating to me, because I happen to think of myself as an artist who happens to be a lawyer. and I try to be artful in lawyering as much as I can when I write or when I perform in a courtroom, right? I feel it's a performative piece there. And so so I love art and I love the creative process, and just hearing you describe it there was very enjoyable for me. So thank you. Just a couple things I want to say, like, this forum is about public art, and I was a philosophy major, and I tend to think philosophy is a public activity too. I tend to think a lot of things are public activities. And one of the most, I think, public philosophers out there, at least he deems himself to be one, is Cornel West. Cornel West is a race scholar and public philosopher, calls himself a jazz man as well. I mean, he's a lot of different things. Cornel West wrote a book in the 90s called Race Matters. And it was a clever title because it was a double entendre, right? Matters about race that we're going to talk about versus race matters. Race means something, right? And the book was controversial when it came out. It's a classic now in the social science space. But it struck at a set of uncomfortable yet fundamental truths, right? And we've been talking about this. That race should not matter, right? But it does. The way race functions in society is abhorrent, and it bothers everybody. It bothers minorities who are feeling the brunt of racism, and it bothers white Americans who don't feel like racists yet see racist outcomes in different areas of our world. And so we all agree that it should not matter, right? So there's the world as it is and the world as it should be. And I think the work of public art is to bridge that, right? Is to make the world as it is reflect the world as it should be, right? And with race, we have a clear path, right? We know that it shouldn't matter. We know we're all the same. We know that race doesn't make us different in any sort of biological way or behavioral way. And we just need to enact that in our own lives, you know, and I think art allows room for redemption, for people to see other, you know, to see yourself in the art and to see others in the art, and to allow some of these difficult conversations to be kind of flattened out on an ambiguous plane, just like Kaveen was talking about, to finally sort out and explain that race shouldn't mean anything, that we're all human beings. And so that sort of room of redemption to allow people to get over their implicit biases and to jump out of stereotypes and to sort of free yourself from those, that socialization, right? And to re-socialize yourself into a pluralistic, multicultural country. Like that is, that's the true magic. You know, it's like in those spy movies where where they're going into a safe at a bank and they're jumping over these laser beams, you know, and they don't want to trip one of them. That's what race conversations are like. You're jumping over laser beams. You're trying to get into that safe. It's funny, I'm saying that as a former prosecutor because I would prosecute somebody who did that. But the truth is that these are difficult things to do. But I think coming from the place of knowing that race should not function the way that it does in society, I think that's a great starting point. I think your mural, Raphael, really just distills that very well. So those are my final comments. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, C. I wanted to share a before and after picture before we finish. So here, can you see? So this is what it looked like before, and Rafa was able to transform that into what we now see over there.
Oh, great.
So beautiful. Anybody would like to share any other final thoughts?
Yeah, I wanted to say one last thing. I think, especially coming from a student perspective, a lot of the controversy that was surrounding the completion of this mural during its development phase, one thing that I kept on reminding my fellow students and like everyone else was that this doesn't need to be the end-all be-all of public art on campus. You know, a lot of people, I know that Rafa was being very gracious into accepting all of our different requests and politely informing us when some things couldn't just be done or some things that could happen. I think the one thing that I'm looking forward to is seeing more. And I think this mural is a really great first step to more pieces of public art on campus, especially because of how sparse our campus is with displays of diversity such as the mural. So I think I'm just looking forward to it, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds for public art on campus. And I just want everyone to leave with that in mind, so that looking forward to the future of art at this university.
Thank you again so much. Thank you, Kaveen.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sarah, for co-hosting, and the speakers in Rafa and the team, and Deborah also for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
This evening. Thank you so much.
It's wonderful to see and hear from everybody. I wish we could be in person. Maybe our next conversation will be in person.
That would be amazing.
I know, right? Oh my gosh. Have a great weekend, everybody. We so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.